Paul John Knowles, also known as the Casanova Killer, was an American serial killer who took the lives of 18 and claimed to have taken more than 35 lives across 6 different states within a 5-month period. Known for his good looks, to some people who met him, Paul John Knowles was smooth and charismatic. To others, he was their worst nightmare, a cold-blooded killer with no pattern and no regard for anyone but himself. Knowles was an unpredictable serial spree killer who didn't discriminate and killed women, men, and even kids. Born on April 17, 1946 in Orlando, Florida, Knowles didn't have the ordinary childhood as he endured a criminal history of petty crimes. From a young age, Knowles cared little for authority figures. He felt that he didn't need them. He constantly refused to do his schoolwork, talked back to adults, stole, and even once punched a girl in the face for rejecting him. It was said he idolized criminals who traveled across the country, committing crimes, losing their lives in violent shootouts with police, and achieved a level of fame on par with actors and professional athletes. At the age of 9, his father grew tired of his involvement with crime and gave him up for adoption. Knowles was in and out of the Florida School for Boys, a reform school with a terrible history of abusing and torturing its young inmates. We don't know for a fact if he was abused or not, but it's likely the place had a negative impact on him. His first true arrest came at the age of 19, and from that point he would spend an average of half of each year in jail for crimes ranging from burglary to auto theft. He even escalated to kidnapping and was incarcerated for auto theft and taking the police officer hostage. Over the next 8 years, he would be in and out of jail. In early 1974, Knowles was serving a prison sentence in the Rayford prison in Florida, now known as the Florida State Prison. While being incarcerated, he began corresponding with a woman in California named Angela Kovic. They became pen pals, and after a few letters back and forth, had fallen in love with him. She flew out to meet him, and upon meeting him for the first time, Knowles proposed to her. She agreed to his proposal, and before long she would spend her savings on hiring him a lawyer. The lawyer managed to get him parole and arranged for him to fly to San Francisco to marry her. However, days before the wedding, Kovic called it off due to her getting a sudden feeling of anxiety and fear. Also, her sidekick had recently warned her about a dangerous new man in her life. Both of these things combined were enough for her to call off the wedding. Little did she know that possibly saved her life. Later that night, enraged and furious, Knowles claimed to murder 3 strangers on the streets of San Francisco. Although authorities were never able to find the bodies, they weren't able to confirm these murders. What is known, though, to be a fact is that the next day he flew back to Jacksonville, Florida, where he pulled the knife on the bartender during a fight. He was arrested for the bar fight and thrown back into jail. On July 26, 1974, Knowles picked the lock to his prison cell and managed to escape. Knowles' cross-country murder spree began in Jacksonville on the night of the escape. He broke into the home of 65-year-old Alice Curtin, bound and gagged her. He ransacked her home for money and valuables and would later steal her car. Curtis' cause of death was later determined to be choking on her own dentures, and while it was unclear whether Knowles meant for her to die, he was still to blame, making her his first confirmed victim. As the day went on, Knowles saw his face all over the news, and he knew he had to get out of town. As he was looking for a place to abandon the stolen car, he came across 2 young girls, Liliana and Mylette Anderson. He recognized them as being in his family and realized that they could recognize him and turn him in. Instead of driving off and dumping the car somewhere, he kidnapped the 11-year-old Liliana and her 7-year-old sister, strangled them, and would dump their bodies into a swamp. That would bring his total to 3 victims within the first few hours. The next day in Atlantic Beach, Florida, Knowles broke into the home of Marjorie Howell, strangling her with a nylon stocking and stealing her television set. He wasted no time doing so and was soon on the road again going north. While doing so, he picked up a hitchhiker, which remains unknown, and strangled them to death, bringing his total number of victims to 5 within the first few days. After the murder of the hitchhiker, Knowles decided to stay low and off the radar for a few weeks. On August 23rd, he returned back to his old ways of violence. He forced his way into the home of Kathy Sue Pierce, and strangled her with the phone cord. While doing so, Kathy had her 3-year-old son that looked on, although he did leave the little boy unharmed and untouched. 2 weeks later, on September 3rd, Knowles met a businessman in the bar named William Bates, a 32-year-old accountant executive in Lima, Ohio. After drinking for several hours, he strangled Bates and went to the nearby woods to hide his body. He stole his money, credit cards, and car. William Bates was confirmed as his first male victim, and his body wouldn't be found until a month later. Knowles drove his stolen car all the way to Sacramento, where he then turned east to Utah and Nevada, where he murdered campers Emmett and Louis Johnson, near Fly, Nevada, on September 18th. 3 days later, passing through Texas, he spotted a female motorist stranded on the road and stopped to supposedly help her. He instead raped her and strangled her to death, and then dragged her body through a tangled barbed wire fence. On September 23rd, he met beauticians Annie Dawson in Birmingham and instantly found his next victim. They traveled together at her expense until Knowles grew tired of her and killed her on September 29th. Although her body would never be found, his victim total would be over 10 victims across 5 states in about a 2-month span. Knowles decided to lay low again and set to travel through Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, and Minnesota without killing another victim throughout the 4 states. It wasn't long enough until his urge to kill became too strong for him to handle. On October 19th, in Woodford, Virginia, he broke into 53-year-old Doris Harvey's, shooting her dead with her husband's rifle. He would then manage to wipe his prints off the gun and place the gun next to the body, making it look like it was a suicidal. Police found no signs of rape or robbery to offer them a motive in the case. Not only was Knowles well prepared, he was outsmarting the police. Still driving Bates' stolen car, Knowles picked up 2 hitchers in Key West, planning to kill them both. But his scheme went wrong when the policemen stopped him for traffic violations. The careless officer let Knowles go with the warning, but the experience had shaken him. Dropping his passengers off in Miami, Knowles phoned his lawyer for advice. Rejecting a suggestion of surrender, he met with the attorney long enough to hand over a taped confession. He then slipped out of town before police were informed of his presence. While driving a stolen car in Fort Pierce, Florida, a police officer recognized the stolen car the next morning and pulled Knowles over, but Knowles was faster on the draw. Taking the officer hostage, he drove away in the patrol car, using its sirens to stop motorist James Meyer, switching cars a second time. Burdened with 2 prisoners now, Knowles handcuffed both men to a tree in Pulaski County, Georgia, and shot each one in the head at close range. A short time later, Knowles tried to crash through a police roadblock, but he lost control of his car and smashed into a tree. A chaotic foot chase ended when Knowles was pursued by dogs, helicopters, and he was finally cornered by an armed civilian on the woods on November 17th. About 1 month later, after he was in custody, while being transferred to maximum security, Knowles made a last effort to escape. He grabbed for the sheriff's revolver, and in doing so, it set it off. FBI agent Ron Angel shot him 3 times and killed him instantly on the spot. To end my presentation, here's a short interview he did before going to jail for the last time.